One of the more polarizing figures in the UFC returns this weekend. Justin, is Sean O'Malley a superstar?
The Sugar Show. You and I talked about it a little bit like a week or two ago, just about how when he fought, he headlined the pay per view against Aljo. Didn't really seem as if it did a good amount of numbers, according to Aljo himself, which I don't see any reason for Aljo to lie about that. And for me, it's like I think Sean has like a great audience in like me, you and I always talk about. He's got that like Nelk Boys type, like the younger generation fan base following him. But I just don't know if that equates to being a star. At when I talk star, I'm talking a guy who does numbers. Like Israel Adesanya is a star, John Jones is a star. You know what I mean? Like Conor McGregor, those guys are obviously stars. For me, I don't think Sean is to that level yet of where he's. And again, I think he can be if he continues to win. He's going to be. I think the UFC obviously is pushing him and they want him to be a superstar. But as far as like sales and revenue and pay per view, I don't think he's there yet as a true star in the sport. What's your take on it?
Yeah, no, I think we briefly mentioned this in the breakdown, which everyone go check it out somewhere around here. But like, it's very tough to say right now because, like, in theory, I guess he is. But like you mentioned, the real way to like monitor that is like your pay per view buys and things like that. And like, it doesn't seem like he's really producing right now. Like, forever, it was like this guy's next up, like a potential future face of the UFC. The McGregor comparisons keep rolling in, although I'm not sure there's any really weight to those. But like, again, it seems like the kind of dissonance here is that like he's got a huge social media following. He's got a big following with like a generation of kids that like are not buying pay-per-views. So like his popularity doesn't necessarily equate to pay-per-view buys. Like the Twitch streaming, the Nelk boys, like that fan base, like the guys on TikTok who are like posting his edits, like I don't really think those kids are, again, respected pay-per-view buyers like you and myself. They might be pirating it, which again, you're not really speaking my language
Be
there. But
careful,
like,
Dana's cracking down on that.
I know we fucking got him. But yeah, I don't know. So my next question would be like, what does he have to do to reach that, star status? Because like, again, this was a guy, his whole way up, it was like, he was a name, right? Like what car, even the Cheeto loss the first time they fought that was like the co-headliner of DC Stipe, a heavyweight title fight trilogy, like
Was
massive
it? Did
card.
it co-main?
I'm pretty sure if it at worst it was the third the co-main. I believe it was
Yeah.
the co-main. This is a guy before he even had a number next to his name. He was co-headlining like a heavyweight title fight trilogy. They were marketing that as like who's the greatest heavyweight of all time, and this guy was co-headlining it again as a prospect. He wasn't even ranked at this point. And then his whole way up, I mean, he was on he was on pay-per-view main cards as an unranked fighter, but still being marketed as like, as a guy who is next up. When he fought, who was it? Was it Almeida or Paiva? I forget which one, but he was on like the main card of a pretty big card. So we were kind of waiting for this guy. Again, he seemed to have the status and he seemed to have, potential to be that high level of a fighter as well. And he's kind of now has put it all together. Like if you were to say, going into when he was fighting Pedro Munoz 3 years ago, right? That was his enter. He was fighting a top 10 guy, and he was a pretty big favorite over him. And obviously it ended in like the worst possible way. Super boring fight, ends in an eye poke, whatever. His next fight is Petr Yan. Like, and again, if that's controversial, we can get into that later. But like, the guy has now won the belt and then defended the belt. So like, if you don't say he's a superstar right now, what does Sean O'Malley have to do to become a superstar in your eyes?
For me, dude, I just think it's tough to say. Like, I think you got to continue to win big fights in devastating fashion. Like, you see, you know what I mean? We see the guys that I named earlier, the McGregors. Connor didn't even have like a long title run, but he was his come up was him going out saying he was going to KO these dudes and KOing them, like, and then when he got his chance in, again, like Sugar got a chance in a big fight against Aljo, and he delivered with a great counter shot, put him out. And it's just, I think we got to see Sean do that a lot more to gain the superstardom of those guys, because I think obviously the people, not the casuals, but like true MMA fans like ourselves, we appreciate everything that's going on in the sport. We recognize when somebody's on the rise and what they're doing, and you can't do anything but respect what he's doing right now. But again, I think it's hard when, like I said, the true fans also do look at it and they're like, look, the guy just defended his title against such a weak opponent. Like, yeah, Cheeto beat him, but it's the same as Pereira fighting Roundtree. Like, the UFC knew what they were doing making that matchup. It's a tailor-made fight. That's why they made the matchup for Sean on his come-up years ago. It didn't go as they planned, obviously. But I just think until he continues, if he comes out and sparks Marab, he goes and defends the belt. Like, if we see him start to continue to beat these elite contenders and really make a name for himself as a true top 5 pound for pound guy, I think it's only a matter of time until he becomes, at least a guy that could do half the numbers of a guy like maybe Izzy. You know what I mean? Just because Izzy didn't even, he had his great performances, but it's like we talk about, Izzy's title run wasn't anything insane. Like, you know what I mean? But he sold, he could sell, even though he's cringy, his numbers, he was able to sell pay-per-views pretty well.
So is it all about numbers for you, like pay-per-view buys? Is that what you consider a star? Because like, dude, that the reason why it's so interesting to me is because like he was probably like the most popular unranked fighter maybe ever. Like, do you remember how this guy's been popular for so long? Like, even I remember when he fought in the Apex, like during COVID, when he knocked out what's his name, Wineland. Like, people were already talking about this guy like he was a star, like he was a potential future face of the UFC, potential future superstar. Like, the only thing we were waiting for was his like potential to be realized in the cage. And if that's not what he's done, then what would you call this, right? So I'm not arguing that he is a star, because it does seem like there is some sort of disconnect between like what we talk about him as and like the numbers he's producing. Because now, again, everything's changed so much these last couple of years. I feel like in terms of these fighters like marketing themselves, every fighter has like a YouTube channel now. Every fighter has a fucking podcast. They do all this behind the scenes stuff. They're doing everything they can to like become a bigger name, because that's how you get big fights. Yada. That's how you get paid more in the UFC. So like, this guy had been doing that before any of them. Like, this guy had been posting skits he was the king of social media for the UFC, like forever. And now all he's done is go and get the belt over Aljo, who people were saying is like, already in these like all-time bantamweight conversations. He knocks him out in spectacular fashion in Boston in front of, like, I mean, what more do you want? Like, what more could make him a bigger star? I guess that's kind of what I'm confused about. And again, it doesn't really seem like he is as big of a star, but he is. When you ask like the casual UFC fan, the guy who's like a sports fan who will tune in to like the big fights, and he could name a couple guys, like O'Malley's one of the guys that people knows. He's one of the guys that the UFC pushes a ton, again, through social media and these things. So like, again, I'm just wondering, it seems like he's realized that potential in the UFC octagon, but it maybe hasn't resulted in like him becoming the star that we thought he could be, right? Because like, even now, look at, since he's become champ, 299 was like as stacked of a card as you could possibly make. I was just looking at that main card. Like, that could not have been a better card. People were complaining that it was like just as good of a main card as 300. Even like they had, like, I mean, Blades and Almeida on the prelims. Like, that was a sick card. You had Dustin Poirier, you had MVP's first fight in the UFC, Gilbert Burns, Jack Della. And now they're putting him on the Sphere, which like, it doesn't. Another quote I want to talk. Dana just said like the Sphere is the star, like in response to people saying there isn't enough good fights on this card. So yeah, I was just curious to hear your take on it. How do you think this card will sell?
Dude, it seems like it's struggling to sell, and we saw the reports of ticket prices going dropping like last week, crazy amounts, and it's like I'm not going to blame that all on Sean not being like able to sell because obviously the tickets were crazy expensive. But it's like you said, I agree with you. I mean, when I'm talking to some guys that even on the team that like I wouldn't say are into MMA crazy, I'm like, yo, they a lot of them are like, yeah, the Sugar Show is fighting this weekend or something. You know what I mean? It's like the casual fans seem to know Sean O'Malley, but it's just like I think a true tell sometimes to me when a guy is a real star, at least pay per view wise, is when you start to see the UFC put them on cards and the rest of the card is not very stacked. And like you just hinted at, like for instance, when Izzy, if you go back and look, like don't get me wrong, when he fought in International Fight Week or whatever, I think the card was pretty good. But like a lot of Izzy's big like headliners, the cards were not like crazy stacked. He had some. He defended the belt plenty of times, but I'm saying like a Conor McGregor, whenever you see a McGregor card, the rest of the card's pretty like average at best. And that's part of me personally. I think it's because the UFC knows that they're already gonna sell regardless because of that headliner McGregor. It doesn't like you put McGregor on a card, it's gonna do top 10 numbers regardless of the rest of the fight card.
Holly Holm co-main when he fought Cowboy, I think. But,
yeah. So
sorry, go on.
No. So like that, it's just that's a tell for me when I think a guy's a big star. And I also wonder if that has to do with like pay-per-view points, like because obviously champions are getting paid pay-per-view points, and I just wonder like if they have a guy that does sell big time, if the UFC almost doesn't want to stack the card to where they don't have to pay him an insane amount of pay-per-view points if the card's that good and going to do numbers like that. But again, it's tough to tell. Like you said, it's hard to say why O'Malley isn't. I think it's clear that he's not like a McGregor yet or whatever. But and again, McGregor's I don't want to compare to McGregor. That's like once in a lifetime probably. But even the Izzy's like maybe we see Sean get to that type of level. I think it's doable for sure. But I mean, only time will tell. He's got to deliver with these performances because another thing is yes, he beat Aljo. I think he lost to Jan. I think a lot of people think he lost to Jan. But it's like we got to see him win those elite these big time fights like this one against Merab. Merab's a true number one contender. He goes out and puts Merab out. I think it's only gonna make his superstardom grow, exponentially. So
yeah, well, a few things. One, I hate to be that guy, but if you look back at Izzy's card, dude, just running through it in my head, bro, Izzy headlined some sick cards on paper, some loaded cards. So my question, like, again, we can't compare anyone to McGregor. Conor McGregor completely changed the sport. So yes, every card he was on, you look at the rest of the fights and it was like pretty poor. I see it go viral every couple months. His return fight versus Cowboy was like the worst main card of all time. And it was still a top 5 seller of all time. And again, you don't blame the UFC for doing that. It's good. The point of putting together a great card is to have it sell well. If McGregor is going to sell well anyway, me and you could fucking co-headline it. We know how that would go. We don't have to run the tape. But but Izzy headline, bro, I'm thinking back when Izzy fought Jan, that was a crazy card. When Izzy fought, it ended up being terrible. We watched that one together, but it was like the biggest letdown of all time. When he fought Costa, we had Jan versus Dom Reyes, another title fight as the co-headliner.
Yeah,
281 MSG.
That was a COVID like island. They had no other choice but to load that card up.
MSG 281, bro. Poirier versus Chandler. There was a women's title fight on that card. That card was wild. And then 287 in Miami was sick. So like, bro, okay.
But that's still only that's 3 to 4 cards of what? Izzy's headline probably double digits. You know what I mean? Like his last one. I'm just clicking on Izzy's thing. Let's go down some of the cards.
Dude, when he fought Vettori, there was Figgy versus Moreno and Nate Diaz return versus Leon.
Hold on, I'm going through it right now. Okay,
those are 5 stacked cards,
bro. All right, his last card, the card he just headlined with Duplessis, not a stacked card at all.
That card stunk, but other than that,
hold on. The
And Strickland stunk. Okay, you're
Strickland
2 for
card
2.
stunk. All right, hold on. Pereira 287. Hold on. Results. Dude,
Masvidal in his backyard.
bro, the card
Banger.
was the Masvidal versus Burns, Rob Font, Yanez, Kevin Holland, Ponzinibbio. You're considering that stacked?
Dude, Jorge Masvidal was a top 5 biggest star in the UFC at the time. And he was fighting in Miami in his backyard. I was there. The place was going fucking crazy. That was like the people's main event. It was Jorge Masvidal's retirement fight. Are you going to tell me Masvidal? Dude, Masvidal's name comes up when you were talking about the biggest stars in the sport.